for us, sir. Thanks for once again being with us. Professor Vijay Kumar has obtained his PhD in electronics science from the Delhi University, and he pursued his master's and MPhil in physics from Delhi University. Previously, he served as the postdoctoral fellow at Professor Nim's lab, Universität Cologne, Germany, and worked with Professor Peter Grunberg, who was a Nobel laureate in physics in GMR Sensor. He also worked as a postdoctoral fellow at Ruhr University, Bochum, Germany. And he was a research scientist at Research Center, Jülich, Germany, a research faculty at the Center for Magnetism and Magnetic Nanostructures, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, USA. He has secured several awards and honors, such as the co-researcher of Nobel laureate physics in 2007 by Jülich University. He was the DAAD Fellow of the Cologne University, Germany, and the DAAD Fellow of the University of Bochum, Germany, in during early 90s. Friends, DAAD is the world's largest funding organization for international exchange of students and researchers, and he had the distinction of obtaining twice this fellowship, international fellowship. He was conferred the award for Fellow of Structural Engineer, Fellow of the Structural Engineering Research Center of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India in 1988. He was awarded the Senior Research Fellowship in 1998 by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Government of India. He has significant collaborations with various international institutions, organizations, and agencies, and offers academic and research consultancy to the Research Center at Jülich, Germany, Center for Magnetism and Magnetic Nanostructures, University of Colorado Springs, USA, Electromagnetic Division, Advanced High Frequency Devices, NIST, Boulder Laboratories, Colorado, USA, Advanced Material Research Institute, University of New Orleans, USA, Seagate Technology, Bloomington, Minneapolis, USA, and Department of Physics, University of Memphis, USA. He has published over 100 articles highlighting his research contributions in world-renowned peer-reviewed journals and has authored several books to his credit. His areas of interest and specializations include nanoelectronics, spintronic, giant magnetoresistance GMR sensor for read-write head of computer hard drive, MMIC, microwave monolithic signal processing nano devices, magnetic nanocomposite based microwave absorber for stealth technology, nano bioelectronics, GMR biosensor, radio frequency hyperthermia for cancer treatment. His research his research towards nanotechnology and its applications started since 1994 when he joined the microwave electronics laboratory of Professor Nims at University of Cologne and Professor Grunberg, Nobel laureate of physics in 2007 of Research Center Jülich, Germany, to fabricate and characterize giant magnetoresistance GMR sensor structures for read-write head of computer hard disks. So with this brief introduction, actually his CV runs to several pages, but I had very difficult task in culling out this information as his research work is very exhaustive, and we consider your expertise a very valuable resource for this program, sir. We don't want to take much of your time, and we don't want to stand between you and the participants. We would like to now hand over the platform to you, sir. Thank you very much. And friends, the first session will be presented by Professor Vijay Kumar Konar. He will highlight on the nanotechnology and its applications during this first technical session. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So please allow me to share my screen.
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. Can you see in the full screen mode?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Full screen mode is visible, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
the introduction. And this is really very lengthy. So I also don't like to listen so many things. Okay. So coming to the first session. So this is the title of our sort of course. So what I don't know how I can justify my talk to this. You people has to judge it. The dear participants. So please have a patience for 1.5 hours with me and listen to me. If you have any questions and any doubts, you can also email me at the end of this talk. Also, you can have my mobile number to contact in the JNU site. By the way, I'm not the chairperson anymore in the center. One of my junior taken over some few months before. I was the chairperson since last 4 years, and then I gave it up. So coming to the what we have done, so what I have done and my group has done so far, what I have done over the time since last say 25 years in this field of nanotechnology and its applications. What I have you also read through was through all these. I worked with Peter Grunberg, and later on he got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of GMR sensor. So I will talk a little bit on this, but this topic, I think you better listen to the Seagate people. So I will leave that behind, and I will tell about how the GMS sensor can be applicable to the medical technology or the medical device. It can be a medical device. So that topic I will discuss. Also, the work which I had done at UCCS in Colorado Springs, Colorado, along with Vida. And thereafter, I'm also going through this topic with my students at JNU, that is the MMICs, microwave monolithic integrated circuits using magnetic nanostructures. And so basically, I will talk about three major fields of research which are directly beneficial to the mankind. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, so, uh, so what is nanotechnology? If you see this slide, the left side is the biological part. This is the nanometer scale, the human hair, and then coming down to microns, RBCs, then even come down to the DNAs. The middle part is nothing but the electronics, the vacuum tube in the earliest days, that is the millimeter range. Then the transistor, it came to 50 micron technology. Then the Intel processor, this comes down to -6, the micron technology. The right side is the computer world, which has a floppy disk, what you can see here some 30 years before. Now it is a hard drive, and then there are so many hard drives that the Seagate people are going to talk about. So this is all about the scenario of nanoscience. As I said, the nanoscience has no boundary. It can be a chemistry, it can be a biology. So it is better to combine all the fields of science along with engineering to make some devices or some applications to this field of research. Specifically in India, it is lacking. It should come up with a very large scale. We are third in the position of publishing paper, but in the translational technology, it is not that great from Indian side. I hope it will, over the time, it will come up. So this is the side scale where the quantum mechanical effect plays an important role in defining the overall matter's properties. So what I will talk is the budge point. Now the main point, in at least in India, is the COVID-19. Everywhere there is a kind of mess going on everywhere. So how the nanoscience, nanotechnology can combat or apply to the COVID-19, starting from the virus detection with the sensors. It can be vaccine with the nanoparticles. It can be virus control through vaccine, through some reagents, or it can be PPE kits one can think of. Now, why I'm showing this slide is this is a sensor, is a field effect transistor based sensor produced by some company and some research group, because I am also applied to the Department of Biotechnology for the design of a GMR sensor for the detection of early stage cancer as well as the COVID-19 the early stage diagnosis. That is why I'm showing this slide now. Coming to the first topic of my talk, that is the microwave electronics. These are the tunable MMICs using magnetic nanostructures. If you see the MMICs, this can be applicable starting from the mobile communication to point radio communication to the automotive communication. What we concentrate on the low microwave gigahertz band, that is in the C band, and it also goes up to something like millimeter waves. Millimeter waves means the 24 gigahertz and higher. The main thing which is coming up to our mind to see what is the millimeter wave applications is the nothing but the 5G technology. 5G technology has a lower frequency band as well as a high frequency band beyond 24 gigahertz. But the all the chips available are very limited at this moment. Very few companies over the world are making these kind of discrete devices. We also tried in this line since last, say, something like 20 years or so, when I joined the University of Colorado for this US ARO grant. Under this US ARO grant, we are asked to make discrete devices like filters, phase shifters, isolators, circulators. So we started this group with the in a group of Vignesh Zelinsky and Professor Kemley. And I remember I myself and Veera Kumar contributed a lot in this direction for the design of the MMICs. Why these MMICs are so important is that the military has a need to see through the fog, clouds, and smoke. These obstacles are transparent for particular frequencies in the gigahertz range. The signal processing in this range is significantly important. This frequency range has simple in use, like the tracking and landing on planes in the severe weather condition. If you see the weather condition in Delhi in the winter season, no one can see beyond something like few feet. So it is important that one has to see, though there is so much of smog or fog is there in the cloud. The cell phones, if you see the cell phones now, the 5G technology, though 5G has a lower band, less than 10 gigahertz, but the high band is also there beyond 24 gigahertz. So what is the aim? The aim is the frequency tuning of a single device over a broad frequency spectrum. That is the need of the hour. So for this, how much we have, or I have, my group has contributed to this, I'm going to talk now. These are few of the components which are available in the market. There's a HE component, there's a microwave component. So many components are available in the market, but they are very discrete. They are very limited in frequency range. What we are doing is many devices. We started at the University of Colorado for the US Army Organization grant, and then I'm doing the same thing at JNU with a variety of passive and active components like filter, phase shifter, mixer, high power frequencies like power limiter, signal to noise enhancer, resonator, and finally our aim is to make the printed array antennas and the phased array antennas. There are a few publications down there. And a phased array antenna is nothing but what we plan is to make a handy device to give the signal from a signal source to a number of patch antennas. These are the control units to control the phase of the antenna, and then you have a patch antenna in front of this. It can be n number of antennas, so that if you see the patch antennas are very large, they are truck-loaded big instruments, but our aim is to make this device. We are in the prototype stage. What we are designing is a handheld type of phased array antenna. In this, the main lobe, what you can see here, is moving over, and then it is not required to move the antenna whole from its direction. It will change the phase and it will be directed 360 degree from an omnidirectional antenna to a directional antenna. Now, why these are applicable? Because one can put these antennas like is a chip, so one can put it on top of a aeroplane. One can also put it on top of a tanker, or it is a very useful is on the drones. If you put it as just a small chip, a phased array antenna, so in the border of the boundary of the country, one can see what is happening on the other side with some kind of a camouflage. Now, the second topic, what I will discuss, not in details of the giant magnetoresistance sensor as a whole, but how we are applying these kind of sensing devices, because these are very, very small size sensor, very significant sensor. And as you see that, these are the two gentlemen from Albert Fert from France and then Peter Grunberg from Germany. These are the two people who discovered this device. And the discovery was in the late 90s or the middle of 90s, but they awarded the Nobel Prize in 2007. And my contribution to Peter's group is some of this. I will show later some more things. Now, how these devices are used for the medical field. So this is nothing but a multi-layer structure of the GMR sensor. Then we made the GMR sensor and scale it down with a photolithography system and also a E-beam lithography system. Then on top of the sensor surface, we put the chemistry to functionalize it, then put the DNA strand with the nanoparticles for the detection of the early stage cancer. This is for the early stage cancer. And then this is the whole device. How a readout can be come out from the signal surface from the sensor. It can be controlled by just a small pencil cell battery. It can also be regulated as a number to show whether it is a early stage or a middle stage, or there are 4 stages in cancer. So one can find the stage of the cancer. So these are few of my publications, and these are few publications in the line of cancer treatment and the hypothermia, which I will talk towards the third part. So third part is the nanobioelectronics, the magnetic nanoparticles driven cancer therapy. So cancer therapy means what we can do is the guided nanoparticles, and then it can be a diagnosis by a MRI. We take the help of Ames Daily. They have an animal MRI system for 6 Tesla system. So for that, there we do the MRI on the mouse model. And then in my lab, we do the hypothermia, the treatment of the cancer through hypothermia treatment, the heating the area of the cancer through the guided nanoparticles to ablate the cancer cells, not to ablate the healthy cells. So I'll start the first part. There is the high frequency signal processing MMICs, microwave monolithic integrated circuits. Why these are useful? Because you can see this slide as the high frequency. This is the signal processing devices for the 5G and beyond, also using variety of nanostructures, 1D nano rods or nanoparticles, quantum dots, and thin films. Why 5G? 5G, as you can know, the enormous data capacity, rapid speed, incredibly low latency. So these are the bands of the 3G, 4G, and then 5G is the higher band, as I was talking about, beyond 24 gigahertz. So the high frequency bands covered much smaller area, but can carry much more data. So these are the satellite communication. You can see the uplink and downlink frequencies are all different at the different frequency bands. Then I'm not going to the details, because if anyone is interested, can talk to me later on, any companies or any researchers. So what we saw here, what the nanotechnology gives us. If you see in the earlier days, like the 70s and 80s, this is our kind of a mobile phone. Now what we have is on top of a palm, we have not just the mobile phone, it is a whole full-fledged computer having hundreds of applications and so much of data storage inside this. So the miniaturization can be possible with the application of the nanostructures. How it is so? I'll just tell that what you can see here is the basic principle of what we do is the band stop, band pass, and phase shifters. And the basic principle or the physics behind this is ferromagnetic resonance. So what we take is the ferromagnetic material, which has a magnetic moment. That magnetic moment persists around this equilibrium position when we have a RF field perpendicular to the DC magnetic field. From this, we get the operating frequency, which can be controlled externally by applying a magnetic field. It can also be controlled by a voltage also, depending upon what kind of material we are using, and also different kind of anisotropic field which can be built in to the structure. Say, for example, if it is a nanowire, it has a bias field inbuilt from its shape anisotropy. So shape anisotropy is a amount kind of a energy which can be built into the device. So means that the device can operate even beyond 10 gigahertz without application of any kind of magnetic field or voltage from outside. Now, going into details of this, there's a little bit of theory for this. What we saw in the earlier slide is the torque motion of the magnetization is coming from the M cross H effect. And finally, what we get is the operating frequency. Operating frequency of the device can be controlled by a magnetic field from outside and its internal energy. The internal energy, as many, we have the saturation magnetization, depending upon what kind of material we are using, like iron, cobalt, or nickel. These are the transition metals, their alloys we can use. Also, we can use another material which is called as a multiferroid. Multiferroid is a material where it can show the magnetic properties as well as the electric properties. So through the electric property, we can also tune the device through a voltage, not even a electric field, not even a magnetic field is required for this. Now, a little bit inside this, what we are used to do in the signal processing devices, in the monolithic devices, is the microstrip line or the coplanar waveguide. A microstrip line is a device through which we propagate the electromagnetic waves between the two conducting planes. These are copper conducting planes, and between these two there is a dielectric structure. Through this dielectric structure, the electromagnetic wave propagates. So as you can see that this is a transverse magnetic wave, so there is no cutoff frequency. In principle, one can operate this device. And how to operate this device? I'll just go in the next slide. So the operating frequency can be tuned by the parameter which is used here. Now what we do engineering to this device is we put a magnetic layer just below the signal line, or maybe somewhere in between, on top of the ground plane or in between any of the dielectric. Dielectric can be a silicon dioxide or other materials. So here what we have used is the 50 nanometer thick, is a very small thin layer of iron film or permalloy film. From the ferromagnetic resonance condition, we can have the power absorbed in the ferromagnetic films. So this is what about the simple theory says. Those who are familiar with the electromagnetic theory, they're also familiar with the Poynting vector. From the Poynting vector, one can find out what is the amount of energy which is absorbed by the material when it is passing through from port 1 to port 2 inside the device. So the parameters which are here used are the thickness of the dielectric, the thickness of the magnetic film, and then what you can see here is the design consideration. So just the solution for this differential equation, what we get is the key design parameter. There is absorption of this material, how much energy is absorbed. This depends upon the thickness of the magnetic layer. This is the red one here. It also depends upon the thickness of the dielectric layer, but we have to do some kind of adjustment not to make too much of eddy current losses, because the magnetic material is a metal. We can also use a insulator like a yttrium iron garnet, but yttrium iron garnet is not a very good material in the sense of going towards the high frequency range. It has a very low saturation magnetization. So we use the iron film, but iron film has a eddy current loss. So we cannot go beyond some few tenths of nanometer or 100 of nanometer. Then the imaginary part of susceptibility is also coming to picture when we are designing this microstrip lines. After doing some calculation, the high frequency simulators, what we saw without a magnetic material, that the electromagnetic waves are just concentrated below the signal line. What we thought is we can put the magnetic material just below the signal line so that it is going to absorb all the electromagnetic energy and can have an operating frequency that can be tuned from outside. So just going through this is few more HFSS calculations. And then what you can see here is through the HFSS, this is the high frequency simulator calculations. We can see that the electromagnetic energy just below the signal line can go up to even 300 to 400 Oersted. It's a huge field to make high power devices. Now, what we do here is the microstrip waveguide based signal processing devices. There's a microstrip line, is a silicon substrate. Then we deposit a ground plane of copper set. Then we have a dielectric. What is showed there is through which the electromagnetic wave will propagate. It is silicon dioxide, a 4 micron. On top of this is the tuning material, that is a iron film, for example. Here, the 100 nanometer. On top of this, it is a signal line again. So between these two conducting layer, there is a copper layer at the bottom and the copper layer at the top. The electromagnetic wave will propagate from port 1 to port 2. And if you regulate this magnetic layer, one can have a operating frequency at different microwave range. What you can see here is the operating frequency by using different kind of materials. It is not just limited to ferromagnetic materials like nickel, permalloy, cobalt, iron, or the alloys of iron, cobalt. But you can see here the range of frequencies what we can go up to. We can even go up to 43 gigahertz, which is well in the millimeter wave range. And what we do is first we deposit this layer, then through a pseudo mask, we top layer, we deposit this to have a planar structure. This is a planar structure. So in the second deposition, we do the layering of the dielectric, then the magnetic layer, and the top signal lines. Then by photolithography and dry etching, we get the device in this form. This has many devices inside. So what we can see here is just not a band pass or a band stop filter. There are many elements which are phase shifter, many elements which are isolators. So one can have many kind of devices inside a small chip, and then one can do the packaging for these devices to make the final product. So here, these are few of my instruments which I have had in JNU. This is a pulse laser deposition system for the monocrystalline with a single layer, single crystalline epitaxial film growth of some magnetic insulator as well as magnetic metals. Like magnetic insulator, what I said is yttrium iron garnet is a best insulator because this has a very narrow line width. If one want to design a very narrow band filter, one has to go for this yttrium iron garnet structure. If one wants to go for a higher frequency, one has to go for the iron or the iron cobalt or some kind of a transition metal structure. It's just not the magnetic structure. It can also, we can build or we can deposit various kinds of multiferroic or dielectric structures which can be tuned by a voltage. So this is a sputtering system. Also, this is a electron beam evaporation system. Both together for the designing of multi-layer films. One can transfer. This is a transfer arm. One can goes from one end the thin film deposition by the sputtering system. This has a 4 heads are there. 4 sputter guns are there for different materials. And then one can in situ come back to the E-beam electron beam system. Is the electronic control for this. One can have a multi-layer, so 100 layers, just programming of this structure through the electronics of this. Then by use of a direct light lithography system, we what in our lab, what we are going is down to 1 micron technology, not beyond that, because this is photolithography. If you want to go below this, one has to use the electron beam lithography system, so for which we depend on other institutes. Now, what is the methodology? Methodology, as I said earlier also, we have a silicon substrate. We deposit a copper layer. On top of the copper layer, we have a dielectric deposit through the pseudo mask. Then we deposit an iron film. At the end, we deposit a single layer. Then this is a nanowire based. This is a nanowire based. What we have is in the nanowire, we buy the templates from available commercially. Then we deposit a layer of metallic layer at the bottom of this. So this acts as a metallic layer. for the deposition of the magnetic layers, magnetic metal layers through the 3 electrode system. This is called as, this is a, sorry? Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the final structure on the nanowire based devices. What you saw here is the ground plane, the dielectric, which is filled with nanowires, and then the top line is the signal line. So through these conducting layers, electromagnetic wave will be propagating. So this is now in the one-dimensional structure. So this matrix is a hybrid matrix now. What is the beauty of this structure is you do not need any kind of a external magnetic field from outside to bias the device, as this has its own energy coming from the shape and isotropy of the device, of the structure. So this is an unbiased device depending upon the magnetization factors, demagnetization factors. Taking some kind of engineering, we do the unbiased structures. So we design bandstop filter, phase shifter. We also design isolator, and to design isolator, we do a little bit of engineering to the structure just to deposit the metallic or the ferromagnetic metal nanowires on the one side of the signal line, and the other side we just block it, so that the electromagnetic wave, when propagate from port 1 to port 2, it can see the structure because of the elliptically circulate electromagnetic wave propagation from port 1 to port 2, from when it is coming back from port 2 to port 1. First of all, let me say what is an isolator. Isolator is a one-way traffic. That means if we put an isolator in between a source and a load, that means the propagation of electromagnetic wave should be there when it is propagating from the oscillator towards the load. If there is any unwanted reflection from the load, it is possible all the time, it should be absorbed inside this isolator. It should not come to the oscillator. Otherwise, it is going to burn the oscillator. So this is a very important device for the microwave circuitry. Similarly, we designed also band pass filter. This is two antennas are just 1 micron apart, and we fed the wave in port 1 here, and then short circuited in the other end, and receive this antenna at the port 2 here, and short circuit at this end. Because of the ferromagnetic resonance, at the ferromagnetic resonance, there will be coupling and there will be a band pass region. So band pass filter, and designing this band pass filter through the nanowires, even one does not need an external bias field. Only the shape and isotropy is going to give me an operating frequency when we use the one-dimensional nanowires. Now, to grow the nanowire, this is a very simple technique. One can do this through the electrodeposition. This is an electrodeposition cell. It's a three electrode electrodeposition cell, and where the material is deposited on this the template. When we put the template on the working electrode, having the counter electrode or the reference electrode is to maintain the voltage so that we can have a uniform growth, and then we can have the total magnetic layers inside as a wires. These wires, diameter of the wires, we design from 20 nanometers to something around 200 nanometers, depending upon the frequency of operation of this. It's a very simple technique, very cost-effective technique, very cheap, just a electrode system, nothing else. Now, coming to the measurement of these devices, what we do is I have a vector network analyzer in my lab. When we design this with the nanowires, we put this nanowire containing the device here. This is the device here. We fed the electromagnetic wave from port 1 and then let it go to the port 2, and we see the scattering matrix. The scattering matrix are the reciprocal matrix, which have the voltage ratio, the power ratio, through which one can define the filter or the phase shifter characteristic, or any device as a whole. So this is designed through a probe station, but this is not going to be a device. For this, we have to design a device with the connectors here, the microwave connectors attached to this. So we can have a discrete device of filter, phase shifter, isolator, separator, whatever you want to make it. But if you want to do research R&D, one has to use the probe station, so that what we can do is you can put a number of devices in one chip. Hardly a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter, you will have hundreds of elements inside the MMIC elements. One can see the characteristic of these elements through the network analyzer. Then after designing this, what we saw here is, say for example, a nanowire based band pass filter. It is a two antennas are there at a, say for example, a 1 micron. We designed the antennas which are something like 2 micron to 10 micron apart from one signal line to another signal line, depending upon what kind of operation we want to do. But you can see here, there is a very small field of 0.5 kilohertz, 500 hertz. Thus, the operating frequency is almost close to 8 gigahertz now. It's a high frequency, the microwave range of the X band. If you tune this field outside, you can have this, the same device can go to the higher field, like 15 gigahertz. Even putting a little higher field is a 1.2 kilohertz. The same device can operate at 2.5 kilohertz going towards 20 gigahertz and beyond, and so on. If we put a little higher field, it can go even up to 30 gigahertz and so on. After designing these devices, what we do is we put these devices in the casing unit. Then by using the wire bonder, we bond this device between the two input and the output connecting devices to the network analyzer. What we saw is this device has a frequency tunability, that is the difference between the frequency of the maximum field used to the zero field divided by the zero field to the 100% is 300%. Is a huge range that is starting from 8 gigahertz and going towards something like 35 gigahertz. Because this magnet is not a very good thing, near a magnet near a device. So we design other kind of devices which are electric voltage devices. These are, as I said, these are voltage device, means these can be a multiferroid. The multiple characteristic of the ferromagnetic and ferroelectric. So one can tune the device by using a voltage rather than a magnetic field. So what we saw here is the iron cobalt boron based nanowire based filters. What we saw here is the filter characteristic. There is a low field. Then if you increase the field, you can have a stop band going beyond, from starting from something like 28 gigahertz going towards 30 or 32 gigahertz. So this is one of the nanowire based filters. Then I'll show you a nanowire based line phase shifter, and this is designed from the same transmission line which we designed for a filter, and we are using the phase shift of the differential phase shift, because we can measure the phase shift, the real and the imaginary part, through the network analyzer. Just using the real part, we can define the filter, but using the imaginary part, the phase shift, we can have a differential phase shift with respect to the phase shift what we got at the zero field. As you can see here, the frequency, at the different frequency, we have differential phase shift. What I showed here is different phase shift, but here the phase shift, you can see that this is huge, but this phase shift is of no use, because at this frequency there is a huge insertion loss because of the stop band action. So what we choose is lower side of the stop band and higher side of the stop band. The lower side means the insertion loss, the design parameter or the practical applicable devices should be 3 dB, or it is less than 3 dB. 3 dB means half of the power is gone, lost. So we need a device, if it is used for a phase shifter, it should be less than 3 dB. What I plot here is the low frequency, high frequency range of the phase shift. And what you can see here, the phase shift is going from some 50 degrees towards 250 degrees at the lower side and at the higher side of this. So this is the testing of the phase shifter. Now, what you've done is the device packing through the wire bonder. Through this, as I said, in 2014, we are one of the recipient of this imprint project along with IIT Delhi. This is my project, and we have done this along with the Rod and Schwarz. This is a company from Germany, and through this we designed the device. And when we put the device for the testing, we have to make the wire bonding to this device, and then the packaging. Through the packaging, we can market it. We have not yet done because the project is still running. We can market it through this partner or somewhere else also, because we have in JNU, there is a innovation counter also we have in the JNU campus. So this is if we have a phase shifter. What I said earlier is that if we have a number of phase shifter, we just need a signal generator. We fed the signal electromagnetic wave, and then from this signal source, we can give it to the phase shifter, the series of phase shifter. In front of the phase shifter, we have the patch antennas. If we control this phase shifter and the antennas, one can have a phased array antenna system. A patch antenna is an omnidirectional device. But if you control this with a series of phase shifter, one can direct the main lobe of this antenna, the main lobe of the antenna, from something like 0 degree to 360 degrees all around. That means we do not have to rotate the phased array antenna system by using a truckload of a huge antenna. But on the other hand, one can use this as a signal processing complete device, just as a handheld device. This is our final output of this antenna structures, or the phased array antenna structures. Now, from here onward, I will go towards the second direction of my research, that is the GMR sensor and their applications. GMR sensor, I am not going to go in details because the Seagate people are going to tell more about this. We just do the R&D, and what I have done with Peter Grunberg, I will show you here. And then the third part is the medical application of this. So in this topic of research, what you can see here is a GMR sensor. This sensor consists of the permalloy layer. This is a permalloy-based GMR sensor. It is a cobalt layer. It is a hard magnet. And then if you blow off this, you can see that what we have is a 3-layer structure. This is just a 3-layer. The bottom layer is pinned to a antiferromagnetic layer. That means the magnetization of the bottom layer is not able to move freely, but the top layer is free to move. So this free layer one can sense in the hard drive, whether it is a 0 or a 1 state. That means the information is there or information is not there from the GMR sensor. So what we told in the beginning is that the Peter Grunberg, along with Albert Pert from France, for the discovery of giant magnetoresistance sensor in 2007, but they have started doing it, I think, from the early 90s or maybe even in the mid 80s also. So what does this means? This means is the discovery of giant magnetoresistance, or the GMR. So the 2007 Nobel Prize, Physics Nobel Prize, is awarded for the technology that is used to read data on hard disk. It is thanks to this technology that it has been possible to miniaturize hard disk using GMR effect. The MP3 players and the iPod industry would not have existed without this discovery. This said by Mr. Johnson, a member of the Royal Society, Swedish Society of Science, to the Associated Press in 2007. So you would not have an iPod without this effect of GMR. What I'll show you here is the GMR head. I'm not going to the details of this. So one can sense a 0 or a 1. That means the information is there or not there. And how the GMR sensors are going towards very, very high limits now. That is, the Seagate people are going to talk. The physics is behind this is the giant magnetoresistance is a nanoscale phenomena. So giant refers to giant change in the resistance due to current. So it is a quantum mechanical magneto-resistive effect observed in the thin film structure composed of alternating ferromagnetic and non-magnetic layer. If you have a standard resistor, so the current flow is going to be only this much, only through this band structure. You can say it can control the band structure, but you cannot change it. But if you have a spin valve structure, spin valve is a tri-layer, two magnetic layers separated by a non-magnetic spacer layer. Depending upon the spin up or the spin down electrons, which is majority there, one can have the blue lines which have a current flow, a lot of current flow, or you can have a very limited current flow if you have the red lines here. So the barrier is now changing according to the spintronics effect. So this is the theory of the spintronics of the GMR sensor. What you have is, you can see that all the layers are parallel to each other, or you can have a structure which you have the adjacent layers are anti-parallel to each other. So the theory says the GMR is the anti-parallel combination minus the parallel combination divided by the anti-parallel combination. This is the GMR value, the percentage unit. So the band structure is going to change. Like the density of state function, one can do the band structure calculation for the GMR theory. I'm not going to the details. Theoreticians are there. Do this. This is the first GMR experiment done from ULIS, from Peter Grunberg's group. This is the iron, chromium, iron structure. What they saw here is, if you see this structure is a 3 nanometer thin iron films, two thin layers of iron with even a thinner layer of chromium, that is 0.9 nanometer, means 9 angstrom, means 10 to the power minus 10 meter. They saw a change of something around 60-70% of changes. The 80% change, what you can see here, if you have a spacer layer of chromium down to 0.9 nanometer. If you increase the thickness of the spacer layer, the GMR value decreases. Even more decrease if you have a much thicker chromium layer. But the length scale is the important thing which you want to see this. But this is only possible for epitaxially grown single crystal thin films of tri-layer as well as multi-layers. Now from here, the GMR effect or the interface, how it is changing. I think this is not the platform to go into the details of the theory for here, I guess. So I will escape this. What I'll show here is what I have contributed to this gentleman's group. Through the MBE system, we deposited many variety of tri-layer as well as multi-layers, like iron silicon, iron aluminum, iron chromium, iron gold, iron, with a growth rate of 0.1 angstrom. You can see that 0.1 angstrom even. Through the read and the lead pattern, one can check whether these layers are single crystalline or polycrystalline. It has to be a single crystalline, so it is just the R&D. We cannot go beyond that. Depending upon the spin-dependent scattering at the interface as well as in the bulk, one can have the spin scattering, and from the structure, one can have the GMR effect, the GMR values. So I'll just go through few of our publications along with the Peter. This is way back in 96. So what we did is the swept frequency FMR, ferromagnetic resonance, through which we have shown the giant magnetoresistance. This is a contactless giant magnetoresistance. At that time, it was the first published in that time. The iron chromium iron structure, these are made at Grunberg's lab. And what we saw that at the room temperature, the microwave GMR of some of the sample, which has a thinner chromium layer, goes up to around 4 angstrom, 4%. It comes down to 2.8% at the parallel geometry, whereas for a thicker layer of chromium, we saw a little less GMR, but these are microwave GMR, the surface resistance of this, not the actual resistance or the resistivity phenomena. In this work, we try to explain the experiments on the relation between the giant magnetoresistance and the interface roughness. As I said at the beginning, the GMR is a surface effect as well as it is a bulk effect. The interface, how the interface are going to regulate the GMR value on the interlayer exchange coupling. Through the interlayer exchange coupling, one can manipulate the GMR value through a iron silicon or a iron the silicon, so it is not a GMR, it is a TMR, it is an insulator now. So through this values, by the experiment of Brillouin light scattering and the magneto-optic Kerr effect experiments, one can understand what kind of interlayer exchange coupling is there, and through this one can indirectly say how much of GMR values are there. The theory behind this about the Brillouin light scattering, there is the optic, the Stokes and the anti-Stokes spectrum. From this, one can see the optic and the optic and the acoustic mode. There is a in phase precision and the out of phase precision of the magnetization in the tri-layer or the multi-layer structure. Here, the microwave technique is used to show how the exchange coupling of a molecular beam epoxy iron aluminum iron layer. One can see the interlayer exchange coupling and hence the giant magnetoresistance through the ferromagnetic resonance of the acoustic mode. This is the in-phase precision of the magnetization vector of the two iron layers. When these two layers are in phase precise, one can have the deepest resonance or the kind of a notch filter, that the acoustic mode, and when they are anti-parallel to each other or the out of phase precision, one can have an optic mode. Through the theoretical fitting, one can find out what is the exchange coupling between the two layers of the iron layers through the aluminum layer, depending upon the thickness of the aluminum layer and also the magnetic field. So you have a decoupled side, you have a exchange coupled side, you have a 180-degree configuration of the two magnetization, you have a 90-degree coupling where there is a crossover between the acoustic and the optic mode. Then you have a parallel coupling between there's a decoupled mode in a parallel stage. In this work, we tried to explain through again from dynamic and static measurement through the iron silicon iron layer. The fitting of this gives rise to exchange coupling. This is indirectly gives the GMR, the giant magnetoresistance. What you can see here is the interesting part is how the magnetization are aligned to each other in the tri-layer structure. That is, the M1 is the magnetization of the bottom iron layer. M2 is the magnetization of the top layer. How they are aligned at different angle rotation. And the exchange coupling through the silicon spacer. What you can see here, the exchange coupling is the maximum when the silicon layer is at 0.7 nanometer, means 7 angstrom. This is the highest exchange coupling, that thereby having a highest GMR value or the TMR value. Here in this work, what you can see here, instead of a single layer, it is a wedge type of structure. This wedge type of structure is only for the R&D, so only for the research, not for any device application, because in the in situ, one can see the exchange coupling of the GMR through a Brillouin light scattering or the MOOC experiment. How much is the exchange coupling or how much is the GMR through different spacer layer. This is just one structure, but you have different variety of spacer layer, starting from 0 chromium layer to some about 20 nanometer of chromium layer or silicon layer. So this is the theory for this, the anti-phase or the phase. Through the fitting of this, one can find out what kind of coupling it exhibits through this structure. This is the left hand side, the GMR structure for the iron aluminum, and the right hand side, the TMR structure through the iron silicon. Through the fitting, one can understand what is the GMR value or the TMR value or the exchange. Is there something I have to do? Annotation request. What is that? Can anyone answer me? Should I decline? P. Hemant Sai is requesting to annotate the shared content. Well, I'm declining for now. Let's discuss later on. Now, these structures has grown through a molecular beam epitaxy system in the lab atmosphere through the very sophisticated molecular beam epitaxy systems at ULIS as well as at UCCS in Colorado Springs. Now I'll go to the next part of my talk. Half an hour is still there. So this talk is I'm going to tell about the nanoparticles research as a MRI contrast agent as well as hypothermia therapy. So what we saw here is the radiofrequency magnetic hypothermia is a non-invasive approach applied for the treatment of various cancers. So the magnetic hypothermia utilizes magnetic nanoparticles mediated heat generation in the tumor under the alternating magnetic field. Magnetic nanoparticles, which act as a heating source, are injected into the tumor tissues. I submit myself here is that I'm not from biology. My group has biology, so I may not be able to clarify many of the biological this part of the talk, but I'll try to explain. But if you write to me, I'll consult my biologist. I hope I will clarify everything at this moment here. Magnetic hypothermia, as I said, so this is a combined technique. That means what I said at the beginning also, if you put the magnetic nanoparticles, they produce heat in the tumor cells. This is a skeleton of human, but what we have done is the rat model, both diagnosis through MRI and also therapy through hypothermia. So the magnetic nanoparticles produce heat after absorbing the radio frequency through oscillating magnetic field. The heat produced efficiently destroy the tumor cells without much damage to the surrounding healthy cell. That is our main aim, not to destroy the healthy cells. The cells, the beauty of this, not the beauty of the cancer cell, but at least one property the cancer cell possesses is that cancer cells are susceptible to mild heat about 42 degrees Celsius. Cells can survive even up to 41, 42 degrees Celsius. The mild heat cells, because of the compactly disordered blood flow in a tumor, which limits the heat dissipation to the surrounding areas. Now, I'll go to the next slide. This is about the first, what I said is the diagnosis. So this is a MRI system at AIIMS. We took the help of AIIMS Delhi. They have an animal model MRI system. So these are the coil where you can put the animal. We have done our experiment using the Fe3O4, that is the magnetic nanoparticles, and injecting them. Now, if you remember, in a MRI, one always inject the contrast agents to see the image much clearly. Whether it is an ultrasound, whether it is an MRI, one has to inject some kind of a contrast agent. So here what we have done is we inject magnetic nanoparticles as a contrast agent, and then we have done the MRI of the bladder. So what you can see here, the bladder, the clarity of the bladder with the magnetic nanoparticles and without the magnetic nanoparticles, and with the nanoparticles has a lot of difference. So this shows the fluorescence image inside the rat where we have developed the cancer in the bladder and the kidney region. And then by using some MATLAB programming, we can say that the size and the precisional size of this tumor and also the place where it is developed, one can pinpoint the particular size of the tumor and also the position of the tumor. So after this is our in vitro and in vivo treatment of the hypothermia. This is a hypothermia system, radio frequency hypothermia system. We developed the nanoparticles in a test tube, magnetic as well as the cancer cells. Then we can see the heat effect only on the cancerous cells, not on the healthy cells, how much they are heated up by using a very small amount of alternating magnetic field. And then we have done the in vitro studies, developed a cancer in the brain region of the mouse, injecting first, what we have done is first we have developed the glioblastoma tumor. After tumor formation, we have injected chitosan coated iron oxide nanoparticles intratumorally. The rat was subjected to magnetic hypothermia treatment for 2 times, that I am going to show it in the next slide, in the first and the 7th day for minimum 20 minutes. Also, we have measured by using an infrared camera how much is the heat at the cancer cells due to the magnetic nanoparticles, and what is the heat around, means at the normal cells. So this is the setup of the experiment, what is done for the rapid tumor inhibition by magnetic hypothermia regulated by Caspers-3 with time-dependent clearance of iron oxide nanoparticles, which one can see in the Biomatter Science in 2021. This is the publication there. So here is the overview of the hypothermia treatment. We develop the tumor, then we see the growth of the tumor, then we inject the Fe3O4 nanoparticles, chitosan coated, and see that from the tumor site, how much nanoparticle, we also want to see that how much nanoparticles are going to the rest of the body, because it is not a very good sign to inject nanoparticle everywhere in the body, because this has a side effect. So one has to remove the side effect. So for that, we checked other parts of the body of the mouse, how much nanoparticles are accumulated or they are going to be extracted from the body. Through a IR camera, here the overview says the red part is the maximum heated region. The green and the lighter region are very much normal temperature. So at the tumor site, the heated up to 41, 42 degrees Celsius. This is enough to ablate the cancerous cells. So in this slide, what you can see here is the detail of the timeline of the rat tumor model at various stages of the magnetic hypothermia treatment. So this is starting from tumor induction. Here you can see that. Now the nanoparticle injection, then the first session of magnetic hypothermia,